Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. One decision, one word, and suddenly an empire begins to crumble. For Caitlin Clark, revenge wasn't about firing shots on social media or clapping back in interviews. Her revenge was devastatingly simple. She said no. No to Geno Auriemma, and no to UConn's legacy, and no to the $1 million offer that came crawling back to her years later. On paper, it looked absurd. Who walks away from over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? But this wasn't just a contract. It was the lifeline of a man who once dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an afterthought. When Clark rejected that offer, she didn't just turn down a paycheck. She humbled the man who never thought he could be humbled.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
It isn't just about points, assists, or trophies. It's about power. For decades, Geno Auriemma was the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the coach who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who faded into obscurity. But Caitlin Clark flipped that script. She didn't need his approval, his program, or his checkbook. She built her empire without him. And when he finally reached out, she turned him away with a quiet authority that said, Asterisk, I don't need you. You need me. Asterisk, every revenge story begins with a mistake. This one wasn't a blown play or a bad timeout. It was arrogance. Pure, blinding arrogance. Before Clark became the face of the sport, before the sold-out arenas and the record-shattering TV ratings, she was just a kid with a dream. She admitted it openly. UConn was the coolest place on earth.
What does bother me is some of the people I deeply respect, their basketball credentials, their basketball history, their commitment to basketball and women's basketball, I think have really not covered themselves in glory with some of this commentary.
The dynasty, the empire, the home of Taurasi, Moore, Stewart, the mountaintop of women's basketball. For a girl growing up in Iowa, there was nothing bigger. And when recruitment time came, the path seemed obvious. The most electrifying talent of her generation, paired with the greatest recruiter the game had ever known. But the call never came. Geno never picked up the phone, never called Clark, never called her parents, barely even sent a message through her AAU coach. For the greatest recruiter of all time, that silence was deafening. And it wasn't an oversight, it was a choice. The message was clear. She wasn't their priority. His excuse? UConn had already locked in Paige Buchers, and he didn't want 2-point guards. On the surface, that sounded reasonable. But then came the insult. Geno suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that. The coach who built his empire by spotting once-in-a-generation talent before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. It was disrespect.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart.
The kind of disrespect you don't forget. Clark quietly filed it away. If Geno didn't believe in her, she would go somewhere that did. So, she chose Iowa, a program without UConn's banners, mystique or dynasty glow. To many, it looked like a consolation prize. But for Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Geno's afterthought. She was the recruit, the one who would carry the program. From the moment she laced up in Iowa City, she rewrote the script. Her logo threes weren't just shots, they were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds, they were proof. Her record-shattering TV ratings weren't flukes, they were receipts. Every basket, every viral highlight, every broken record was a reminder. You missed this. Meanwhile, Geno doubled down. Instead of humility, he leaned on arrogance. He brushed her off with condescending soundbites, calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. Instead of recognizing her as a generational force, he tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't drag the WNBA into mainstream relevance. Ordinary doesn't cost.
This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. And she's a rookie.
And that's where the irony cuts the deepest. Geno closed the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He thought she'd fade into just another good player. Instead, she built the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen. Without him, when he finally circled back, contract in hand, Clark didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She simply said no. That one word cost him more than a championship loss ever could. Geno just couldn't help himself. Anytime Caitlin Clark's name came up, he found a way to drag her back into Paige Bucher's comparisons. If Clark was fearless, well, Paige was too. If Clark was connecting with fans, so had Paige. It wasn't random, it was strategy. By tethering Clark's rise to his chosen players, Geno kept himself in the spotlight. He wanted the world to believe her success was nothing new, nothing separate from the dynasty he built, but backhanded compliments were thin. And people noticed. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Other coaches noticed.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP at the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
They saw through the act. Clark's brilliance didn't need qualifiers. She was drawing bigger crowds than most professional franchises, breaking records the sport had never seen, and rewriting the conversation around women's basketball. Yet there was Geno, smiling for the cameras while subtly clinging to his throne. Behind the charm was insecurity, the kind that comes when the spotlight is moving away, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Eventually, the mask slipped. The sly digs weren't enough anymore. Geno went from undermining Clark to outright attacking the people who supported her. For months, his strategy had been shade disguised as commentary. Then, in June 2024, during an interview on The Dan Patrick Show, he crossed a line he could never walk back. The Hall of Fame coach, the man who is supposed to represent the pinnacle of women's basketball, didn't just question Caitlin Clark. He went after her fans. He called her supporters delusional. He said they didn't understand the game. And then, unbelievably, he claimed they were so clueless, they were damaging women's basketball itself.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
What crime had they committed? Believing Clark could finish top 4 in MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno, that wasn't passion, it was stupidity, and Diana said it best. Asterisk, this kid's in for a rude awakening. Asterisk, think about that for a second. Millions of new eyes had just flooded into women's basketball because of Clark. Families were showing up in jerseys. The kids were camping out to meet her. Casual fans were tuning into WNBA broadcasts. For the first time ever, Geno's response wasn't gratitude. It wasn't celebration. It was insult. Instead of welcoming the wave of new energy, he mocked it. This wasn't analysis. This wasn't a coach breaking down strengths and weaknesses. This was personal. It was a direct shot at the lifeblood of Clark's movement, the very people who had carried women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight. Geno wasn't just dismissing Clark. He was dismissing the fans who made her rise possible, and because he's Geno Auriemma, people listened. His words carried weight, which made them so damaging and so revealing. By calling her fans clueless, he wasn't just underestimating them. He was underestimating her. He was saying the hype wasn't real, that the success wasn't sustainable.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
Geno thought, in the end, he'd be proven right. But here's where the story gets delicious. He wasn't. He wasn't even close. Clark didn't clap back on Twitter. She didn't cancel interviews. She didn't need to. Her response came where it mattered most, on the court. What followed wasn't just vindication. It was a demolition of Geno's credibility. Caitlin Clark went out and won Rookie of the Year. She didn't stop there. She made all WNBA first team, and when the MVP votes were tallied, she finished exactly fourth, right where her supposedly delusional fans had predicted she would. The very prediction Geno laughed at became reality. And with it, his authority crumbled. This wasn't just a win for Clark. It was vindication for her fans, the ones he had mocked and insulted. Every parent who brought their kid to see her. Every casual fan who tuned in.
You see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side, where, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Every news supporter who bought into the hype, Geno dismissed them as a problem. Clark proved they were prophetic. And the beauty of it? She did it without saying a word. Silent revenge. No rant, no confrontation, no drama, just results. Night after night, she delivered performances that left no room for excuses. Logo threes, crossovers that froze defenders, assists that lit up highlight reels. By the time the awards came in, there was no debate. She had silenced him without ever speaking his name. You see the poetry in that? Geno had positioned himself as the gatekeeper of women's basketball knowledge, the wise elder who knew better than the fans, better than the media, better than anyone else. And yet, the fans were right. Clark was right. Geno was wrong. Every arena she sold out. Every record she shattered. Every accolade she earned was another reminder that he wasn't the kingmaker anymore. She didn't need him. She never did. And here's the irony. Clark wasn't trying to prove Geno wrong. She wasn't chasing his approval. She wasn't even thinking about him. She was just being Caitlin Clark, and that was enough. Enough to expose him, enough to humble him, enough to show the world he was no longer shaping the narrative by the end of her rookie year. It wasn't just about whether Clark had lived up to the hype. It was about how completely she had obliterated every doubt. Geno's insults didn't age well. They aged like milk in the sun. His comments about her fans now read like some of the worst takes in sports history. Bitter, insecure, embarrassingly wrong, but Geno couldn't let go. Being wrong wasn't something he could stomach. And by now, it wasn't just about Clark's game. It was about what she represented. The changing of the guard, the shift in power, the undeniable truth that women's basketball no longer revolved around him. Instead of accepting it, he did what he always does. Kept talking, interview after interview, podcast after podcast. Her name never far from his lips. Each time, the pattern repeated, a little praise, a little dig, a compliment wrapped in a disclaimer. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became. Caitlin Clark wasn't just rewriting the record books. She was living rent-free in Geno Auriemma's head. At some point, words stopped being enough. Geno had spent months trying to shape the narrative with sly comparisons, backhanded compliments, and digs at Clark's fans. But Clark kept winning, kept shining, and his influence kept shrinking. He pivoted. If he couldn't control the narrative with his mouth, maybe he could do it with money. That's how the $1 million offer came into play. By then, Geno had already tried everything. He ignored her as a teenager. He brushed off her rise. He belittled her supporters. He tried to reframe her stardom as just another byproduct of UConn's dynasty. None of it worked. Clark kept climbing. Geno kept fading.